You've always wondered how medieval women managed to carry work, marriage, and unspoken desires in the same tired body. So now you step into her life and feel every ache, every duty, every quiet longing as your own. This is how you find the answers, not by watching from afar, but by waking up as her and staying inside her life until the questions grow slow, heavy, and no longer need words. You wake in the dark before morning, not because you choose to, but because the day pulls at you the way a rope pulls at a bucket in a well, steady and unavoidable. Your eyes open to the low curve of the thatched roof just above you, blackened by years of smoke, the faint shapes of rafters like ribs overhead. Straw pricks your skin through the thin linen of your shift, and the smell of it, mixed with old ash and sour wool, is so familiar that you hardly notice it until you remember that once, in another life, you did not sleep in smoke at all. Beside you, a warm, heavy weight breathes slowly. Your husband's back turned to you, his shoulder a solid, silent line. Beyond him, somewhere, the smaller, irregular puffs of breath from the children on their pallet by the wall. A little chorus of soft sounds that tie you to this place more tightly than any law. Your own body wakes, like something that has been used too often, complaining before the first movement. Your lower back dull and stiff, your hands aching faintly from yesterday's spinning and scrubbing, your feet remembering the hard, packed earth they will meet when you swing them down. For a few heartbeats, you lie still and listen, not only to the breathing in the cottage, but to the deeper quiet outside, to the way the wind rubs itself along the walls, to the silence where the church bell has not yet rung. You know exactly how much time you have until that sound, how many slow breaths you can steal for yourself before the day becomes everyone else's. You take them because you have learned that no one else will give them to you. Your eyes half closed, mind drifting through the list that never ends. Fire, water, bread, children, animals, husband, neighbors, field. And somewhere far down at the bottom, if there is anything left when all those are done, a tiny space that might belong to you. You shift carefully so as not to wake anyone, feeling the straw rustle under you, the cold edge of the blanket slide away from your shoulders. The air bites at your skin, not the brutal cold of deep winter now, but the damp chill that lives in stone and earth and wood, always waiting. When your bare feet touch the floor, they find what they always find: uneven hardness, small sharp bits of straw, the faint stick of spilled something long since dried. You stand slowly, knees protesting, and feel the weight of yourself settle back into its usual places. Your body no longer the idea of a woman, but the reality of one who has carried water, carried babies, carried sacks and bundles and days, who will carry more today. In the dark, you dress by touch. Linen, wool, the same faded colors rubbed smooth at the edges. Apron tied firmly, hair twisted up and covered, each layer another piece of armor against work and weather and eyes. Your husband mutters once, turns his face deeper into the bedding, and then is still again. His rest never broken by the tasks that pull you up first. His sleep a kind of luxury you no longer even resent, because resentment uses energy, and you cannot afford to waste that on what never changes. You move across the narrow space of the cottage, one hand grazing familiar surfaces to steady you. Here the rough table, there the stool, there the low cradle where the youngest child is a dim shape inside. And each touch is like reading a line of the same old story with your fingertips. In the hearth, the embers are not quite dead. A faint red glow under the gray, and you crouch, bones complaining, to coax them back into flame. Your breath warm and soft on the ashes, your hands arranging twigs and thin scraps of wood with practiced care. Smoke curls up, eyes stinging and comforting at the same time. Because where there is smoke, there will be heat. And without heat, nothing and no one in this house moves. As the first thin tongue of flame catches, your mind flicks ahead, counting the wood left stacked, how long it must last, how much you can burn now and still have enough when the wind turns cruel again. This calculation sits in your bones, the way multiplication tables sit in the mind of a clerk, invisible but constant. When the fire is properly awake, you hang the pot, feeling the familiar weight in your hands, and reach for what there is to put in it. A little coarse grain, last night's scraps, maybe a dried pea or two, whatever can be made to stretch into warmth that fills the mouth, if not the stomach. As you stir, the wooden spoon circling slowly through the thickening water, you hear it at last, the sound that measures your days. The church bell, far off, yet near enough that it echoes inside your ribs. It rings not only for prayer, but for order, for work, for the invisible web of time that binds your life. Lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. Each one a reminder that your hours are never truly your own. You cross yourself almost without thinking, a quick pattern on your chest, a small, private knot tying you to something bigger than the cottage, bigger even than the Lord's fields. And for a breath, the gesture feels like a shield. Then the moment passes, and there is water to fetch. The world outside the door greets you with its own mix of smells and textures. Damp earth, manure, old hay, the faint sweetness of something blooming somewhere you do not have time to look for. The sky is a pale, uncertain color, not yet committed to sun or cloud, and the air tastes of the season, of what needs doing, more than of any named weather. You step out with the buckets, wood pressing into your palms, rope biting into your fingers, your feet remembering every uneven place in the lane, skirting a rut here, a stone there, without needing sight. Other doors are opening too. Other women stepping out with the same movements, the same tools, the same half yawn, the same quick tuck of hair back under cloth. You nod to each other, not stopping, because there is no time to stop. But in that brief meeting of eyes, there is shared knowledge. This is how it is for me. This is how it is for you. We are all pulled by the same bell and the same needs. At the well, there is already a small knot of bodies, buckets bumping, voices low so as not to wake those who still sleep, or to avoid calling down notice from whoever in the manor might still be dreaming in sheets, far from the rough stone here. You take your place in line without protest, because there is no point in protest. And while you wait, you let your thoughts wander in the only direction they safely can, along the long, slow path of the day ahead. You think of bread, how much flour is left, whether the last sack will stretch until the next measure, whether you can cut the slices thinner without your husband grumbling and the children's eyes going too wide. You think of the field, whether you will need to go there today or whether your presence is more necessary at home, mending, carding wool, watching the youngest. You think of your husband, the way he will wake in an hour, expecting the fire burning, the pot warm, his work shirt laid where he can find it, his needs already met before his feet touch the floor. You think of yourself last, what your hands will feel like tonight, what small, nameless ache will settle in your chest when the cottage is quiet. The rope of the well scrapes softly against the stone as it turns, bucket going down, bucket coming up full, water sloshing, some of it spilling down the sides to darken the rock. When it is your turn, you grip the handle, arms braced, and lower, lower, until the faint splash below tells you the bucket has found what you need. Then haul it up again, muscles pulling, shoulders stretching. This movement so familiar that your body can do it even when your mind is elsewhere, as it often is. You fill your buckets, feel the combined weight drag at your arms, and begin the walk back. Careful steps, careful balance. A quiet pride in not spilling more than a few drops. No one praises you for this. No one sees it as anything but expected. But you know, deep inside, that this long practice of control is its own kind of strength. The ability to hold and not waste, to carry and not break. Back in the cottage, the warmth from the hearth has grown, a small determined circle of comfort in the smoky dimness. You set the water down, stretch your fingers once, and move to the table, where the coarse flour and the little pile of grain wait. Making bread is one of your central tasks, a thing that stands at the heart of your day, as firmly as the church stands at the heart of the village. And as you pour, stir, knead, your whole being focuses on this simple transformation. Powder and water and salt becoming something that will keep the family on its feet. Your hands push and fold and press, the sticky mass yielding, growing smoother, warmer, a faint sheen on the surface like a promise. And all the while you are counting silently, not numbers but mouths, your husband, your children, yourself. Wondering if the loaf will be enough, wondering if you can tuck a crust aside and no one will notice. Save it for a day when you feel like you might fall apart and need something just for you. This thought flickers and fades, not because it is wrong, but because there is no place for it in the open air. It is a longing you keep under the same cover as your hair, hidden, smoothed, never quite gone. The day unfolds slowly, not in grand scenes, but in dozens of small tasks that blur into each other, your body moving from hearth to door to yard to field and back again, carrying, scraping, scrubbing, mending, stirring, scolding, comforting. Each action a tiny stitch in the fabric of the household that no one will notice until one is left undone. You feed the children, their small hands eager, their eyes bright, their complaints half-hearted because they know as well as you do that what is in the bowl is what there is. You wipe a face, untangle a knot in hair, snap at someone for spilling, then pull them close a moment later when they stumble, your touch both rough and soft. Because there is no time to separate tenderness from impatience. They come from the same tired heart. Your husband rises at last, rubbing his face, grunting, asking if there is food, if his shirt is mended, if anyone has heard from the neighbor about the plowshare that needs fixing. And you answer each question while your hands are already on the next task. Your own questions kept behind your teeth. How long will my shoes last? Will we have enough firewood? Will this cough become something worse? Outside, beyond the low fence, the field waits, its dark earth marked with the grooves of past labor, rows and furrows like scars that never fully heal. On some days you will go there too, side by side with your husband, bending and straightening, hoe biting into weeds, fingers pulling at roots, your skirts tucked up out of the way, your back burning, your hands blistering more under the handle. No one says that this is men's work, not when the harvest is at stake, not when there are too few hands. So you move through it as you move through everything else, adding this field to the list of rooms you must keep in order. On other days you stay closer to the cottage, spinning wool, your foot working the treadle, the fibers twisting and tightening under your fingers, the constant low whirring sound like another sort of bell, measuring out long hours. While you spin, you watch the children, one eye always on the smallest, to keep them from the fire, the well, the animals, the sharp edge of the world. Sometimes your husband's voice drifts in from outside, talking with a neighbor, talking about the Lord, about taxes, about weather. And you hear his words as you hear the wind, something that affects you deeply but is never aimed at you. All the while, marriage sits at the center of this small universe, not as something shining and romantic, but as a structure, a set of expectations, a pattern you must step into each day, whether it fits or not. Your husband is not a monster, not a storybook beast. He is a man worn by the same worries as you, but allowed to show them differently. His anger flowing outward more easily, his silence heavier when it comes. You have learned over the years how to read the set of his shoulders when he comes back from the field, how to hear in his tread whether the day went poorly or just as usual, which is often poor enough. You have a mental scale where you weigh your words before you speak them. Does he seem brittle? Then you hold back your own complaints. Does he seem softer tonight? Then maybe you ask gently about that tear in your dress, or that extra bit of flour you might need. Always balancing, always adjusting, because peace in the cottage is one more thing you are expected to maintain. In the evenings, when the light leaves the sky and the fire becomes the only sun you have, the cottage shrinks and time stretches. This is when the weight of the day settles fully into your bones, when your hands finally grow still for a few breaths between one task and the next. The children cluster close, drawn by warmth and habit, their voices quieter now, their movements slower. Your husband sits, his legs stretched out, his eyes on the fire or on the small piece of something he is carving, his thoughts somewhere you do not fully know. This is also when your quiet, forbidden thoughts come closest to the surface, the silent desires you will never name aloud, the wish for another kind of life, or simply for a day where someone else wakes first and makes the fire while you lie listening, knowing that for once, nothing depends on you. You push those thoughts down, not because they are sinful exactly, though the priest would say they are, but because they hurt, because dwelling on what cannot be is like rubbing a blister until it bursts. Instead, you let your mind wander in smaller, safer directions, perhaps toward the next market day when you might see faces from other villages, perhaps toward a bit of colored cloth you once saw and cannot forget, the way it flashed against the dull crowd like a flower. You imagine, just for a moment, tying such a piece of cloth in your own hair, and the image warms you in a way the fire does not. Later, when the children are settled, limbs tangled, mouths slack in sleep, and your husband's breathing has taken on the heavy rhythm that means he has left the day behind, you are once again the last awake, as you were the first. You bank the fire, pulling the embers together, covering them with ash so they will live until morning. And in that small, glowing circle, you see your whole life, bright and hot in the center, surrounded by gray, always needing tending, always on the edge of going out. You lie down at last on the straw, feeling every part of your body protest, then slowly surrender. And as your eyes close, you are still half balancing, half measuring, not numbers now, but pieces of yourself. How much you gave today, how much you have left, how much you might hide for tomorrow. Work, marriage, silent desires, they are not separate piles you can put in different corners. They are threads twisted together into the rope that binds you to this cottage, this man, these children, this village. You have no words for this balance, no safe way to speak of it, but you live it day after day until it shapes your back, your hands, your dreams. And as you drift toward sleep, somewhere between the last ember's orange and the first chill creeping back in, the question that brought you here in another life loosens just a little. You no longer think, how did she do it? You simply feel how it is done. You do not think of your life as work and not work. There is only what must be done, and the spaces in between when your hands are still. Even those spaces are never truly empty. They fill themselves with mending, straightening, listening, worrying. If someone from another world asked you to point to your labor, to show the beginning and the end of a workday, you would not know where to put your finger. It is like asking where the wheel begins on a cart that never stops rolling. You wake, as always, before the light, your body pulled out of sleep by habits older than memory. You open your eyes into the same dim cottage, the same low roof, the same shapes in the dark. There is no bell inside you, but your bones feel the hour. Your back speaks in a dull ache. Your wrists twinge. Your feet remember yesterday's steps. You rise not because you have rested enough, but because if you do not, the whole day will tilt out of balance. You make the fire. You stir the pot. You slice the bread thinner than yesterday and hope no one complains. These early tasks are so familiar that your hands move before your mind is fully awake. You could list them if you had time. Light the fire, warm the water, prepare the bread, wake the children, check the embers, sweep the hearth, shake the bedding, right the stool someone knocked over in the night. But you do not list. You just do. Thinking in lines and lists is a luxury for people who are not being pulled from all sides. As the light grows, the cottage fills with movement and sound. The children stir, complaining about the cold or the way their sibling kicked them in their sleep. Your husband groans as he sits up, rubbing the stiffness from his neck. His day will be long and hard too, but his work has a start you can see when he steps out the door with tools on his shoulder and his back to the fields. Yours has been going on since before he opened his eyes. You wrap a bit of cloth around your hair, tie your apron tighter, and step into the steady stream of tasks that carry you through the hours. You do not stand in one place and push through a single job until it is done. Instead, you move in circles, cottage, yard, well, field, back again, never quite finishing anything, always being interrupted by something else that cannot wait. You put the pot on, then a child cries and needs help dressing. You return to the pot, stir, add a scrap, then notice the pile of unwashed bowls from last night and start on those. You are elbow deep in cold, greasy water when you remember the chickens need feeding. On your way to them, you step over a dropped piece of cloth, bend, pick it up, and lay it on the bench where the mending basket sits, already overflowing. You feed the chickens, scatter grain, check for eggs, hear your husband call for water, sigh, wipe your hands on your apron, and go back to the bucket. By the time you reach it, the pot is boiling over, and a child has tipped something on the floor. From the outside, your work might look like chaos, but inside it, there is a pattern you have learned without words. You know which tasks can wait and which will cause trouble if left more than a few breaths. You know that if you do not sweep the hearth early, ashes will get into the food. You know that if you do not set the bread now, there will be nothing to chew when the children are back from errands and your husband from the fields. You know that if you forget to carry the slops out, the cottage will soak in a sour smell that clings to everything. This knowledge is not written anywhere. No one praises you for it. It is a map in your mind, constantly redrawn as seasons and needs change. The work that people see when they look at you is only the outside layer. Your hands kneading dough, your arms lifting buckets, your shoulders bent over washing. They do not see the counting you do in your head. How much flour left? How many logs? How many days until the next measure? How many mouths? They do not see you measuring time by the way the shadows move across the floor, by the distance between one bell and the next, by the feeling in your ribs that says, if I do not start the evening meal now, there will be trouble. Once, when you were younger, you thought that being grown would mean you could choose when to rest. Now you know that rest is something you snatch, like a crust fallen from the table, whenever the day's teeth are not biting too hard. You lean against the wall for a moment when the baby finally sleeps. You sit on the low stool for a few breaths while the pot simmers and nothing is boiling over. You stand by the door, hands idle, as you wait for the bucket to fill at the well. In those tiny pauses, your body wants to sag completely, but you do not let it. If you relax fully, you may not be able to haul yourself upright again when someone calls. Your work changes with the seasons, but it never lessens. In spring, the fields call loudly. You go out to help your husband and the other men clear stones, repair fences, plant seed. Your hands are in the earth, fingers cold and muddy, feeling the clods break and crumble. You move down the rows, scattering, covering, patting, careful not to waste a single grain. Each seed is a gamble, a prayer pressed into soil, and you feel the weight of that prayer in your knuckles. When the planting is done for the day, you do not go home to rest. You go home to start the next round. Making food, cleaning children, mending clothes torn on hedges, scraping mud from the floor so it does not become another layer of ground under your feet. In summer, the light wakes you earlier and leaves you later. But the longer days do not mean more leisure. They mean more hours in which work can be squeezed. You rise in the cool gray, trying to get as much as you can done before the sun beats down. Laundry is best then, when the wash water is less icy on your arms, and the cloth will have a full day to dry. You carry piles of stained shirts and shifts to the stream or the washing place. Scrub them against stones or boards until your shoulders burn and your fingers wrinkle. Then wring, 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 twisting water and dirt out in long ropes. The sound of other women doing the same surrounds you. The slap of wet cloth, the splash of water, voices rising and falling in talk that is part comfort, part complaint, part warning. This is one of the few times you are not surrounded by your own family's needs. Here, your work is still hard, but it is shared, visible. For a little while, you are one among many, not the center of a single cottage's universe. On harvest days, all other tasks thin out before the field's demands. You tie up your skirts, wrap a cloth around your hair to keep sweat and dust from sticking too much, and take your place among the bending backs. Your hands, so used to spinning and stirring, now grip stalks and gather bundles, your fingers nicked by straw. The air hums with insects and the rough music of tools. Your children, if they are old enough, glean at the edges, tiny hands picking up what the scythes leave behind. You keep an eye on them even as you work, counting their heads between each armful, folding that worry in with all the others. Worry about the weather, about the yield, about your husband's mood if the steward is displeased, about the winter that will come, whether the grain is enough or not. Back at the cottage after such days, your body is a collection of pains. Your lower back pulses, your feet feel like stones, your arms buzz. And still there is water to be fetched, food to be cooked, someone's shirt to be washed because they tore it on a fence, a child to be soothed because they ran afoul of something bigger than them. Your husband falls onto the bench or the pallet with a groan, sometimes asleep before the bowl is empty. No one tells him to get up and wipe the children's faces or scrub the pot. Those are your tasks, even on days when you can barely straighten your spine. In autumn, work becomes a kind of counting. You gather and store grain, roots, herbs, wood, anything that can be kept against the months when nothing grows. You move between cottage and garden and woodshed like a shuttle between threads, pulling one thing here, tucking another there. You string herbs up in smoky bundles, your fingers smelling of sage, thyme, whatever grows in your small patch or on the edge of the forest. You check the sacks of grain, feeling them with your hands, as if you can judge by touch alone whether they will stretch to next harvest. You tuck little bits of food away, as secretly as you can, a handful of dried something, a heel of bread, because you know there will be days when those scraps feel like a miracle. No one calls this planning. It is simply what you must do. The way birds tuck seeds into hidden corners. Winter changes the shape of your work, but not its weight. There are no fields to go to, no laundry days by the stream that leave your arms aching and your mind lightly eased by gossip. Instead, there are endless hours inside the same small walls, with the fire as both blessing and burden. You must keep it fed, one eye always on the embers, adding wood carefully, never quite sure if you have enough. Your hands are busy with spinning, mending, patching. You turn old cloth into something that might last another season. Stitch over stitch over stitch, until your fingers throb. Children are underfoot more, restless, loud, cold. You shush them, entertain them, scold them, wrap them tighter in blankets, your patience stretching thin as smoke. Your husband grows irritable with being kept from the fields, worry about food and taxes and news from the road sitting on his shoulders like another cloak. His frustration spills into the cottage, and part of your work becomes absorbing it, smoothing it, steering around it so that it does not break anything or anyone. All year long, you keep the household going in ways that do not leave traces easy for others to see. If you do your work perfectly, nothing dramatic happens. No one falls sick from spoiled food. No child burns themselves on the hearth. No bucket rots through because someone forgot to empty it. No fire goes out and leaves the family shivering in the morning. When everything runs as it should, it looks from the outside as if nothing is being done at all, as if life simply flows. Only you feel in your bones how many tiny decisions and actions it has taken to keep that flow from turning into a flood or a drought. There are tasks that hurt your body in small, specific ways. Kneading dough leaves your wrists sore, grains embedded in the lines of your skin. Beating dust out of woolen bedding fills your lungs with grit, makes you cough at night. Scrubbing wooden boards until they are clean enough not to breed illness rubs your knuckles raw. These pains you accept the way you accept weather. They come, they go, they return. There are other pains that sit deeper in your chest and your mind. The way no one notices when you are tired until you fail. The way a burnt stew or a poorly mended shirt invites scolding, but 100 meals and repairs done well pass without comment. You are praised not for what you do, but for not causing trouble. She keeps a good house, someone might say of you in a rare moment, which is less about your comfort and more about your usefulness. Your own sense of worth has to grow in a place where no one waters it on purpose. And then there is the quiet work that no one, not even you, calls work. The watching, the remembering, the adjusting. You remember who in the village is ill so you can send a child with a bit of broth, preserving goodwill for bad times. You remember which neighbor can be trusted with a secret and which cannot. You watch your husband's face at church as the priest talks about sin and duty, trying to guess how much of the sermon will be turned into rules at home. You watch your children as they sleep, counting breaths, noting whether they cough more tonight than they did last week. When a stranger passes through, a peddler or a messenger or someone looking for work, there is another layer of labor. You weigh their words, the cut of their clothes, the way they hold themselves. Are they dangerous? Are they desperate? Could they bring trouble or news or a chance? Your husband may talk openly with them about land and war and taxes, but you are the one who watches their eyes when they look at your door, your children, your small store of grain. Sometimes in the midst of all this, you catch yourself standing still. Your hands are empty, your feet are not moving. The world around you continues, but you have, for a heartbeat, slipped out of its grip. In those moments, you might feel something like an old, buried self rise to the surface. A girl who once laughed at nothing, who ran just to feel her legs move, who could stare at the sky without counting how long until the next task. That girl is still in you somewhere. But now, even her laughter has become labor, something you must push through tiredness to give to your children. So they will not remember you only as a moving pair of hands. You do not often think in big words about balance, about how you manage to carry work and marriage and the quieter parts of yourself all at once. But if you were to look at your day from above, you would see how carefully you were always adjusting. A bit more patience here, a swallowed complaint there, a choice to mend this first and leave that until later because your husband will see one and not the other. You give your energy to the tasks that must be done, and whatever remains, small scraps of time, small scraps of thought, you feed to your hidden desires. A moment's gaze at the way light falls on a bowl, a quick touch to a piece of cloth you like, a memory of someone's kind voice, a half-formed wish for more that you never let finish building itself in your mind. At the end of each day, when your hands finally fall still and your body finds its way back to the straw, all that work does not leave you. It settles like dust into your muscles and bones. The tasks themselves may be done for now, but the awareness of them, the endless list of what tomorrow will demand, lies just beneath the surface of your sleep. This is why you wake so quickly at the smallest sound, a child's whimper, a change in your husband's breathing, a shift in the wind. You are never entirely off duty. Even your dreams are crowded with unfinished things, pots left on the fire, fields half sown, children wandering too close to the well. You have always wondered, from somewhere far away, how medieval women endured so much work. From inside her body now, inside your body, the answer is less an idea and more a feeling. It is not one great act of endurance, but 1,000 small ones. Putting your feet on the floor each morning, lifting the bucket another time, biting back a sharp word so the house stays quiet. Fold your own longings down into a shape small enough to tuck in your apron pocket, to be taken out only when your hands are busy and no one is looking. This is the balance you keep, not with scales and measures, but with your own tired flesh. every single day. You do not remember a time when marriage was not somewhere ahead of you, like a road everyone assumed you would walk. Before you knew exactly what it meant, you heard the word in other people's mouths, thrown into jokes at the well, woven into warnings, dropped into prayers. Who will take her? Who will he marry? God send her a good husband. It was spoken over you as easily as the weather, as if it were a kind of season you would enter whether you wanted to or not. When you were a girl, small and light, and still half wild in your movements, you watched married women with a kind of puzzled respect. They seemed to live inside a thicker air. They moved with purpose, their hands always full, their eyes always watching. You saw them at the well, at the washing place, in the fields, bending over bread and babies and baskets, and you knew that whatever marriage was, it made them very busy. You did not yet see the quieter parts, the negotiations and compromises folded into every gesture, the way a woman's whole self was sorted into visible and invisible pieces once she belonged to a man and a house. You remember the first time your parents spoke about your own marriage as if it were something real? You were not so young then. Your hands already knew how to spin. Your back already knew the ache of long days. Your body already changing in ways that make people look at you differently. You were kneading dough, elbows deep in sticky warmth, when you heard your name in your mother's mouth, followed by another man's name, a neighbor you knew only by sight. Your father was at the table, his voice low. The sound of them talking about you and someone else in the same breath made your stomach tighten. You did not understand every word they used: shares, dowry, land, obligations. But you understood enough to realize that this was not about whether you liked the man or whether he liked you. It was about fields and food, and who would take on which piece of the constant work of survival. You stood very still, your fingers sunk in the dough, listening, feeling your own future being weighed like a loaf before the oven, tested for firmness, for whether it would hold together. When your mother realized you were near, she lowered her voice. But it was too late. The idea had already entered you. You went back to kneading because there was nothing else to do, your hands pushing and folding, your mind pulling away from the picture of yourself in another cottage, under another roof, with another man's breathing beside you in the dark. Your wedding, when it came, was not a storybook day. It was a day pressed between two ordinary ones, marked by a little more noise, a little more food, a little more cloth borrowed or bought for the occasion. You remember the cold stone of the church under your knees, the smell of incense and damp wool, the priest's voice droning out the words you had heard at other people's weddings, words about duty and union and obedience. You remember your husband's hand in yours, larger, rougher, unfamiliar yet already claiming a right to your future. You did not burn with love. You did not tremble with grand terror. You felt instead a kind of heavy acceptance, as if you were stepping into a garment that had been cut to a standard shape. It did not fit perfectly everywhere, but there was no other one on offer. Your parents' faces were a mixture of relief and worry. Relief that you had been placed, that someone else would now share the cost of feeding you. Worry that this man, this family, this arrangement would be good enough. Your own face, if you could see it as it was then, would show a strange calm. The stillness of someone who has realized there is no way to turn back on a narrow path. The small celebration after the church was noisy, but your inner world was very quiet. People laughed, drank, wished you well in words that were half blessing, half habit. You moved among them with a new weight on your shoulders, hearing your new name in their mouths, wife of, belonging to, as if your old name alone were no longer enough. You smiled when you were supposed to. You took bites of food you could barely taste. You felt your husband's occasional glance on you, assessing, appraising, wondering as you were wondering what life with you would be like. The first night in your shared bed is something you do not put into words, even inside your own head, unless you cannot help it. You had slept in that cottage already, perhaps, as a guest, perhaps not. You knew its shape, its smells, its corners. You did not yet know what it was like to be the woman who would wake first and sleep last in it. The one whose body had become part of the house in the same way the hearth and the well and the table had. You lay on the straw with your new husband beside you, the blanket rough on your skin, the air heavy with smoke and breath. You knew what was expected, in broad outline, though no one had explained it to you kindly or clearly. You had caught hints in other women's half-jokes, in the priest's warnings about marital duty, in the way brides walked a little differently the next day, the details you learned as they happened, your body realizing what it had been given and what it had been demanded to give in return. There was no violence in that first night. Or perhaps there was, and you buried it. There was awkwardness, certainly, and a sense that something had been crossed, a line in your life before which you were one thing, and after which you were another. You did not fall asleep in a warm haze of romance. You fell asleep because your body was exhausted, and there was no more for it to do. When you woke in the gray of morning and saw your husband's face on the pillow beside you, slack with sleep, you knew that from now on his moods, his choices, and his needs would be woven into every day you lived. Marriage settles into you not as a sudden shock, but as a slow, steady pressure. At first, each habit feels new, filling his bowl before your own, remembering how he likes his shirt mended, which corner of the table he prefers, how he reacts to being woken early. You fumble, you misjudge, you learn. After a while, these small adjustments become automatic, part of the way your hands and feet move through the cottage. You learn when to speak and when to keep silent. If he comes in from the field with his jaw clenched and his steps heavy, you do not immediately tell him that the pot cracked or that one of the children tore their only pair of hose. You give him food first. You watch his posture, listen to his tone as he answers your simple questions. Only when you sense his temper loosening a little do you risk mentioning the broken pot, the torn clothes, the need for more thread. This constant reading of him is its own kind of labor, an invisible work that keeps the air in the cottage from thickening into fear. There are days when he is kind in ways that surprise you. He brings you a small thing from the field, a flower, a smooth stone, a clump of earth that smells rich, and sets it on the table without a word. He takes the bucket from you when you are more tired than usual and carries it to the well without making a fuss. He steadies your elbow when the road is slick. These gestures are small, but in a life where nothing is wasted, small is not the same as meaningless. You tuck such moments away in your mind. Bring them out later when his voice is sharp or his hand is too heavy on the table. There are also days when the weight of his expectations feels like another load on your back. He takes the bread you offer without looking at your face. He complains that his shirt is still damp when the sun has not shone for days. He grumbles that the stew is thin when you have portioned it as carefully as you can. On those days, your answers grow shorter. You move more quietly. Not because you agree with his complaints, but because you know that arguing will make the air in the cottage colder than any winter wind. You are not the only one watching. The village watches, too. Your marriage is woven into the wider fabric of neighbors and kin in ways you cannot control. If your husband speaks harshly to you in the lane, someone will see. If you raise your voice at him, someone will hear. If you are seen laughing too freely with another man at a festival, tongues will move. If you are too silent, too withdrawn, someone will remark that you are cold or proud or ungrateful. The space in which you can be yourself shrinks constantly, bounded by other people's eyes. You find that you have two marriages, the one that exists in public and the one that unfolds between the straw of your bed and the smoke of your hearth. In public, you are careful. You stand at your husband's side, not too far, not too close. You speak when spoken to, you smile when required. You do not contradict him in front of others. In private, the lines shift slightly. You can argue sometimes. You can say, "No, we cannot afford that." You can let your face show more of what you feel. Even in private, though, there are limits. You know them because you have seen other women cross them and pay. You learn the art of quiet negotiation. When something matters deeply to you, some small purchase at market, a visit to your parents, a promise made to a friend, you do not rush. You choose your moment when his stomach is full and his shoulders relaxed. You frame your request in terms of the household, of what is best for us, because you know that speaking too plainly about what you want for yourself will sound wrong on your tongue and in his ears. When he agrees, you swallow your relief and merely nod as if it were nothing. When he refuses, you do not explode. You feel the anger flare in your chest and then push it down, saving its heat for the next negotiation, the next day, the next chance. Marriage also changes the way you carry your own silent desires. Before, your longings were more like open questions: who you might marry, where you might live, what your days might feel like. After, many of those questions close. You know which roof covers you, which bed holds you, which man shares that bed. The desires that remain curl inward, becoming more private, more specific. You notice gentleness now as something rare and precious. When another man in the village speaks softly to his wife, helping her lift a basket, you feel a small ache. Not because your own husband is cruel, but because there is a lightness in that moment that your days rarely have. At a festival, you see a couple laughing together, their faces open, and you feel both happy for them and painfully aware of the distance between that laughing and the way you and your husband usually speak. Your words more often about work and worry than about anything that might be called joy. You are careful with your eyes. You look, but you do not look too long at anyone. You know that a woman's gaze can be called invitation, even when it is only curiosity. You have heard stories and whispers at the well about women blamed for the wandering eyes of men, women punished more harshly for a rumor than a man is punished for an act. You have your own thoughts, your own stray imaginings, but you keep them locked under your tongue. Sometimes lying in bed while your husband's body warms the space beside you, you think about what marriage might have been if you had been allowed to choose differently, or to choose at all. You imagine a man who listens more, or laughs more, or a life where you are not shifted from your father's house to your husband's, but have some corner that is entirely your own. You feel guilt for these thoughts. You hear the priest's voice in your memory talking about contentment and duty, warning against envy, against disobedience, against wandering hearts. You turn those phrases over in your mind like stones in a pocket, heavy and smooth, and yet the thoughts come back. Not always as pictures of different men, but as images of different days. A morning where you sleep until the light is fully in the cottage. An afternoon where you sit by the door and sew just for pleasure. A night where no one expects anything from your body but rest. They are small rebellions, these inner scenes, but they are all you have. You do not speak them aloud, not even to the woman you trust most, because even the safest ear can repeat a dangerous word if pressed. In the middle of all this, there is still a kind of companionship in your marriage that you cannot deny. Your husband is the only person who sees the whole of your days, who knows how many times you rise at night, how many times you cross the floor between bed and fire. He knows the sound of your step, the way you cough, the way you hold your shoulders when you are hiding pain. You know the same about him. The way his voice roughens when worry is heavy, the way he chews when he is thinking hard, the way his hand grips the table when bad news is mentioned. When a child is sick, you are both awake in the dark, listening to the same ragged breathing, sharing the same fear, even if you express it differently. He may pace, mutter, rub his eyes, talk about God's will, while you clasp a small hot hand, whisper prayers, adjust blankets. But under those actions, there is a shared dread, a shared hope that this child will live. When the child recovers, the relief that floods the cottage is something you both feel, though you show it in your own ways. When bad weather threatens the harvest, it is both of you who stand at the edge of the field, eyes on the sky, counting clouds instead of coins. His worry may be about the Lord's share, about what the steward will say, about the debts that already hang over you. Yours is about the stew pot, the breadboard, the children's faces, your own strength. But both your hearts beat faster when the wind shrieks and the rain comes sideways. These shared experiences bind you together in a quiet knot. You did not choose this man out of a room full of candidates. You grew into life with him the way a vine grows along whatever wall it finds. Some days the wall feels rough, unforgiving. Other days it feels solid, something that keeps the wind from tearing you away. As the years pass, marriage becomes less about the ceremony that began it, and more about the constant small acts that maintain it. You lay out his shirt without being asked. He brings in wood without you reminding him. You both learn where not to touch old wounds, subjects that lead to bitterness, to arguments that leave the cottage colder. You also learn where you can still meet, in simple talk about the children, about the neighbor's new calf, about a silly thing that happened at the well or in the field. These shared small smiles are fragile, easily crushed by fatigue or bad news, but they are real. They are the pieces that keep this partnership from becoming only a chain of duties. If you had to explain, in some other language, how you balance work, marriage, and silent desires, you might say that you carry marriage the way you carry water, close to your body, careful not to spill too much, aware that you cannot simply set it down and walk away. You adjust your grip depending on the road, the weather, your own strength. On some days, the weight feels manageable. On others, it feels like it will pull your arms out of their sockets. But you keep walking, because there is no one else to take the yoke from you. You also learn, slowly, that you can carve out tiny spaces within marriage without breaking it. A few heartbeats longer by the doorway when the light is good and the children are occupied. A moment to smooth your hair for yourself before you tie it up for the day. A secret satisfaction when you mend something so well that the tear is almost invisible. These are not grand freedoms. They are hardly noticeable from the outside. But inside, they are the places where your silent desires breathe. One evening, late in the year, you sit by the hearth after everyone else has gone to bed. The fire is low, the cottage dim, a gentle quiet filling the cracks between the walls and your bones. Your husband's breath is a low rumble from the straw, the children's breaths lighter, dotted with small sighs. Your hands lie still in your lap for once. You look at them, at the rough skin, the scars, the faint tremor that comes now when you are very tired. These hands have done so much. Kneaded, scrubbed, mended, held. They have also carried your marriage, smoothing sheets, wiping away tears, cooking meals, steadying shoulders, building a home out of whatever pieces you were given. You cannot separate the work from the marriage from your inner life. They are all tangled together, a single rope that has held you here, for better and for worse. You feel tired to your core. But also, beneath the tiredness, something like a low, steady strength. You have not had the life of a lady in a tower, nor of a woman free to follow every desire. You have had this life, hard, limited, noisy with demands. Within it, you have found ways to keep something of yourself alive. As the fire sinks into glowing coals, you stretch slowly. Lay yourself down on the straw and feel your husband shift in his sleep, turning instinctively toward your warmth. You close your eyes and let your breathing match his. Somewhere far away, a bell might ring, or a wolf might howl, or a lord might make decisions that change the path of your village. Here, in this small space, your universe shrinks to this shared bed, this shared air. Work, marriage, desire, all folded into the way your chest rises and falls. You do not think in so many words. This is how medieval women balanced everything. You only live it, breath by breath, until sleep finally takes you. You do not remember the first time you were told that children are a blessing. It is one of those phrases that has always floated in the air around you, like smoke or dust, spoken by priests from the pulpit and old women at the well and neighbors nodding over cradles. "A blessing," they say, looking at a red, wrinkled, wailing bundle as if they can already see the grown man in the field or the grown woman at the hearth. You learn to repeat the words long before you understood that a blessing can also be a burden, that love can sit in the same place in your chest as fear, that the weight of a small body in your arms is matched by the invisible weight on your back as you add that life to the list of things you must keep from breaking. The first time you held your own child, the world narrowed to the space between your hands and that tiny, squirming weight. You remember the smell most clearly. Not sweet, not clean, but raw and heavy. Blood and sweat and straw and milk all tangled together. Your whole body hurt in ways you had not known it could. A deep, shaking exhaustion that made your limbs feel hollow. But your arms found strength you did not know they had. You cradled the baby, your breath coming in short bursts, your hair plastered to your forehead. The midwife's face hovered at the edge of your vision, lined and calm, her hands still busy, but you barely saw her. The child's face filled everything, the creased eyelids, the tiny mouth opening and closing, the fist that flexed and uncurled as if testing the air. You had heard stories about how a mother is supposed to feel in that moment, a rush of joy, a flood of love. What you felt was more complicated. There was wonder, yes, that this small thing had come from your own body, that it moved and breathed and made noise, that something had changed in the cottage that would never change back. There was fear, sharp and sudden, at how fragile the child seemed, how soft the skull under its damp hair, how thin the skin over its ribs. There was a strange, heavy sense of being tied even more tightly to this life, to this man, to this place. You did not know yet how to name these feelings, so you did what you always do with things that are too large for words. You held them, quietly, and carried on. The first days with the baby blurred into each other. Day and night lost their sharp edges. You fed the child, rocked it, patted its back until tiny burps came, changed its cloths when they were wet or soiled. Your breasts ached, full and hot, leaking at the wrong times, tugged at in the dark. Your sleep became a series of shallow dips rather than a deep well. You never went far under for fear you would not hear the child's next cry. Your husband tried, in his own clumsy way, to help, fetching water, carrying wood, shushing the older children when the baby slept. But his work in the fields did not lessen. The midwife and older women came for a while, bringing advice and herbs and the calm of those who have seen many births and deaths. They showed you how to wrap the baby tighter, how to hold its head just so, how to tell the difference between a hungry cry and a frightened one. Then they went back to their own houses, their own burdens, leaving you with yours. You learned quickly that being a mother is not a separate job from everything else. It is something you do on top of everything else, all the time. You stirred the pot with a baby on your hip, its warm weight throwing off your balance. You carried water with a child tied to your front, the straps digging into your shoulders, the bucket handles cutting into your hands. You tried to mend by the fire with a baby at your breast, the needle flashing in the dim light, while the child's small fingers flexed and grabbed at your shift. You were never truly alone again, not even in the latrine, not even for the shortest walk to the woodpile. There was always a small voice or small hand tethering you. As the child grew, your work shifted, but never lightened. A toddler had to be watched constantly, lest they crawl too close to the hearth, wander toward the well, grab at a knife or a pot of boiling water. Your eyes learned to split themselves, one on the stew, one on the child by the door, one on the spinning wheel, one on the child poking at the cat. You learned to hear danger in the change of sound. A sudden silence meant mischief. A sudden scream meant pain. You yelled. You slapped small hands away from hot iron or sharp tools. You scooped crying bodies up before the hurt could become worse. More than once, your own fingers took the burn or the cut, rather than letting it land on them. You became the storyteller of warnings. You told the child not to go near the well because water spirits drag little ones down. You said this even if you weren't sure you believed it, because the fear in their eyes might keep their feet from the edge. You told them not to run into the lane at night because witches and wolves wait for foolish children. You painted the world in bright lines of danger and safety, because the truth, that danger is everywhere, invisible, sudden, is too large for a small mind to hold. You used fear as a tool because you had so few other tools to keep them alive. There were moments of sweetness, of course, scattered like tiny berries in a vast field of weeds. The feeling of a child's head heavy on your shoulder when they fell asleep there, their breath warm on your neck. The sound of their laughter when you did something silly just for them, sticking out your tongue or pretending to stumble. The pride when their legs finally carried them in a straight line across the floor, when their first real word came out half-formed and perfect. These moments did not erase the exhaustion, but they sat beside it, softening its edges. In a village where children die often, you learn quickly not to take any moment for granted. You have seen other women lose babies and toddlers, the tiny bundles wrapped and buried with fewer words than adults, as if the world itself had not quite decided they were fully here yet. You have seen mothers at the graveyard, their hands pressed flat against a small mound, their faces hollow. You have watched them return to the well, to the washing place, to the field, their bodies moving through the same tasks, only now with an empty place at their side where a child once clung. You know, in a way that sits deep and cold in your bones, that this could be you. Every cough, every fever, every rash on your child's skin sends a stab of fear through you. You hover over them, pressing your hand to their forehead, listening to their breathing in the night, trying to decide if this is the kind of sickness that passes or the kind that sharpens its claws. You bargain quietly with God and the saints. Take my sleep, take my strength, just leave the child. Even though you know that this is not how it works. When sickness comes, as it inevitably does, the cottage becomes a place suspended between hope and dread. You move more carefully, speaking in softer voices. The child lies hot and limp on the pallet, eyes glassy, skin flushed or pale. Your hands become instruments of care, wiping with damp cloths, spooning in thin broth, adjusting blankets, rubbing small limbs to keep them from stiffening. The priest might come with holy water and prayers. The herb woman might slip in with a brew of bitter things that smell of earth and chance. Your husband hovers in the background, helpless in the face of an enemy he cannot see or strike. The hours stretch. You measure time by the child's breathing, by each spoonful they manage to swallow, by the rise and fall of fever. You barely eat, you barely sleep. Your entire self shrinks to the size of that small body. Work still waits. The fire must be kept. The other children must be fed. The animals must be tended. But it all feels like something distant, automatic. You do it because you have to, your mind always dragged back to the pallet. Sometimes, miraculously, the fever breaks. One morning you wake from a shallow doze and realize the child's skin is cooler, their breathing deeper. Their eyes, when they open, are clearer. They ask for food. The flood of relief is so strong it makes you weak. You laugh and cry at once, pressing your forehead to theirs, whispering thanks to any name you can think of. God, Mary, some saint whose feast the priest mentioned last week. For a little while, every chore feels lighter, every sound brighter, because the child is still here. Other times, the fever does not break. The breathing becomes more ragged, then shallow, then stops. There is a moment when the world seems to hold its breath with you. Then there is only silence where there should be a small sound. You feel something tear inside you, but your body does not fall apart. It cannot. There are still other children or a husband or animals that must be fed. There are people who will come and say, God's will, and you can have more, as if another child could fill this exact space. You wash the small body with hands that shake, wrap it in cloth, watch as your husband or other men carry it to the grave. The priest says the right words, the bell might toll once or twice, and then the earth is opened and closed. The mound is small, the marker is rough. You go back to the cottage and see the empty space where the child's pallet was, the cup they drank from, the little scrap of cloth they always clutched. Everything you touch reminds you of the hands that will not touch it again. Grief becomes another kind of work. It sits in your chest, heavy, making each breath an effort. It makes you forget small things, where you put a knife, whether you added salt to the pot, because part of your mind is always at the grave. You cannot lie down and let it swallow you. There is no time for that. You sweep around it, cook around it, scold other children around it. People tell you it will lessen with time. Perhaps it does. The sharp edge dulls, but the weight never really leaves. It just finds new corners inside you to settle into. You find yourself more anxious with the children who remain. You snap at them for climbing too high or running too far. You keep them closer than you might have before, your fear sometimes making you unfair. You know that if you try to protect them from everything, you will crush them. But it is hard to judge where safety ends and suffocation begins, when you have seen how quickly a life can be taken. At the same time, the world around you does not pause. Another woman gives birth, her cries echoing faintly across the lane. A neighbor's child recovers from an illness that looked worse than the one that took yours. A festival comes, bells ringing, people trying to celebrate the turning of the year. You move through it all with a piece of yourself missing. Other women look at you with a kind of quiet recognition. Some of them have their own empty spaces. You see it in the way their eyes flick to the graveyard when they pass. You are not alone in this pain, though it often feels that way. Being a mother in your village is not only about your own children. Care spills outward from you, whether you intend it or not. When an older neighbor's joints swell and she cannot carry water, you send a child to help, and then go yourself on days when she coughs too much. When a woman down the lane is in labor, you might be called to fetch the midwife, or to stand by with clean cloths, to hold a hand, to catch the first cry. When a man is injured in the field, someone sends for you, because they have heard you know which herbs ease pain, which poultices bring down swelling. Your body is a resource the village draws on. Your hands, your knowledge, your steadiness in a crisis. You did not ask for this role, but it grew on you as your own children grew. Older women once guided you. Now you slowly slide into their place, even if you still feel inside like that younger self who did not know how to hold a newborn without shaking. The work of care extends your day and stretches your heart, sometimes until it feels it might tear. But it also gives you a strange sort of power. You are needed. Your presence matters when someone is sick or hurting. In a life where much is decided by others, this matters. There are moments, late at night, when you sit by the fire after everyone else sleeps, and your mind runs back over the day's small injuries and comforts. You think of the child who clung to your skirt, the child who lay still on the pallet years ago, the child you saw at the well today who reminded you of the one you lost. You think of your hands on hot foreheads, on small backs, on shoulders weighed down by grief, not your own. You feel the tiredness of all that touch, all that holding. In those moments, your silent desires stir again. Not just the ones about gentler love from your husband, or more rest, or a day without fear. There is also a quieter, more aching wish that someone would care for you with the same intensity you pour into others, that someone would press a cool cloth to your own brow when you are dizzy, would tell you to sit while they stir the pot, would watch over your sleep for once. You know realistically that this is unlikely. The older you become, the more you are seen as the one who gives, not the one who receives. But the wish persists, a small, stubborn flame. When you think about it from the outside, the way you once wondered in another life what it was like to be a medieval mother, the answer is not neat. It is not only joy, not only sorrow, not only sacrifice. It is all of those braided together. You give your body to carry and feed and soothe. You give your mind to worry and plan and protect. You give your time until there is almost none left that belongs only to you. In return, you receive small hands reaching for yours, small voices calling mother, small faces turning to you first in fear and in comfort. You also receive wounds when those voices fall silent, when those hands no longer reach. You keep going, because there is no other direction to walk. The next day always comes, bringing new work, new laughter, new scraped knees, new fevers, new graves. You balance all of it. Work at the hearth and in the field, the expectations of marriage, the pull of your own unspoken longings, with the care of those who depend on you. The balance is never perfect. Some days you drop things, speak too sharply, forget to mend something important. But you pick them up again as best you can. In the quiet, when everyone is finally asleep, and the cottage is nothing but shadows and the faint glow of coals, you place your hand flat on your own chest and feel your heart beating. It is slower now than it was when you were a girl, heavier, but it still moves, pushing blood through a body that has carried more than anyone will ever fully see. For a moment, you allow yourself to think not of what you must do tomorrow, but of what you have already done. Lives brought into the world, tears wiped, bodies warmed, graves visited. Then you let the thoughts drift away, like smoke up the chimney, and slip into sleep, ready to rise again and resume the work of caring in a world where nothing stays safe for long. You have always been told what you should not want. You hear those warnings long before you understand what they point at. Even as a girl, you are nudged away from certain thoughts as if they were open wells in the dark. Don't look too long at boys. Don't listen too much to pretty words. Be content with your lot. Desire leads to sin. The words desire and sin are tied together so tightly in your world that you grow up thinking they are the same thing. But desire is not a word in a sermon for you. It is a quiet, persistent feeling living in the corners of your days, breathing in the spaces between your chores and your prayers. It begins small, before you even have a husband, before you know what marriage truly means. As a girl, you watch people. You watch young men at the edge of the fields, laughing louder when a group of girls passes. You watch women at the well, eyes bright when a certain man appears, their voices shifting, their shoulders drawn back just a little. You watch the way bodies lean toward each other or away, the way hands linger on a shoulder, a cup, a piece of cloth. You do not yet have language for any of it, but your own body remembers how it feels when someone looks at you for a moment longer than necessary. Your skin knows before your mind does. Then you marry. Desire becomes something that is supposed to live only in one place: your husband's bed, your husband's arms, your husband's rights. The priest says it in church, dressed up in holy phrases. The older women say it more bluntly. Your husband expects it without needing to say anything at all. You learn what is expected of you there. Sometimes it is bearable, almost tender if the day has been kind and his temper soft. Sometimes it is quick and heavy, something you endure as one more duty. You do not think of it as desire exactly. It is more like breathing in smoke. Necessary to stay inside the house, but it makes your chest ache. There are moments when your body surprises you, a flicker of warmth, a rush of feeling that leaves you shaken. You push it down quickly, ashamed, confused. No one told you there might be that, too. Your silent desires do not fit neatly into the shape your life is supposed to have. They slip out at odd times. You feel it at market days. Once or twice a season, if you are lucky, you go with your husband or with other women to the town or the larger village nearby. The road stretches out in front of you in a way your lane never does. And your feet, so used to circling the same small paths, feel a strange excitement just from going somewhere else. The market is loud and crowded, people pressing close, voices overlapping, smells of animals and food and sweat and smoke, all layered together. You see things there you never see at home. cloth in colors richer than anything in your cottage, a deep blue like evening sky, a yellow like late wheat in sun, a red that reminds you of berries crushed underfoot. You see shoes with more shape than your own, fine leather stitched neatly, not just practical but pleasing to the eye. You see plates and cups with little decorations scratched or painted along the edge, useless flourishes that make your fingers itch to trace them. You are there to buy salt, maybe, or a bit of iron, or to sell eggs or a woven cloth you've been working on for weeks. You know every coin must be counted, every trade must bring something needed. But your eyes drift. You imagine, just for a heartbeat, how it would feel to have a bit of that blue cloth around your shoulders, how your own rough hands would look holding a decorated cup. It is not that you want to be a lady, exactly. That life is so far from yours it might as well be on the moon. You simply want one thing that is not only about surviving, something chosen because it is lovely. Your husband sees your glance and snorts softly. "Useless frills," he says. "We need grain, not nonsense." He is not wrong. You nod and let your hand fall back to your side. But the desire does not vanish. It settles deeper, not for that exact cloth, but for the idea of choosing something that is only for you. You feel it at festivals, too. The village church has its holy days, marked by processions, special masses, perhaps a bit of music, maybe a rudimentary play performed with wooden figures or costumed neighbors. The work does not stop, but it shifts. There is more noise, more faces, more excuse to linger outside your cottage. One evening at such a festival, there is a small fire in the center of the village, and people gather around it. Someone with a fiddle or a simple pipe plays a rough tune. Young people dance, their steps clumsy but full of energy, their faces flushed. You stand at the edge with other married women, your hands tucked into your apron, your body swaying a little despite yourself. A younger girl you know, someone not yet married, her hair uncovered and loose, laughs as she turns in the circle, her hand in a boy's. For just a moment, the firelight catches her face and she looks like something lifted out of a story, bright and free. You remember your own hair, loose like that, your own steps, quick and light, before you learned to carry water with that same body, before children's hands weighed on your skirts. Your husband stands a little behind you, talking with other men, his voice low. If you turned, you could see the line of his jaw, the way he holds his cup. You could step closer, make a joke, remind him of the last time you danced before your marriage, if you ever did. Instead, you stay where you are. It is not that you are forbidden to dance, exactly. But dancing now feels like something that belongs to another version of you. One who has no ache in her back, no stains on her apron, no wary eyes watching from the edge. As the music goes on, a man you do not know well, someone from a nearby village perhaps, glances your way. His eyes meet yours for a second, nothing more. He looks curious maybe, or simply noticing. You feel the look like heat on your skin. For that one beat of time, you are not invisible. You are not just wife of or mother of. You are a woman being seen. You look away first, your heart thudding. Guilt rises almost immediately, a hot flush up your neck. You were doing nothing wrong. You did not smile, did not move, but still some part of you feels you have stepped onto thin ice. You tie that feeling into a knot and tuck it somewhere deep. You tell yourself you will not think of it again, but later, lying in the dark, you do. You replay that brief glance, the way your body answered even though nothing happened. You feel ashamed of your own reaction, and at the same time oddly grateful that, for a second, you remembered. You are more than hands and feet and chores. Desire is not only about other people. Sometimes it is about your own self, the version of you that might have been. You think of the girl you were before marriage, back when your dreams did not yet have to fit around a husband's temper and a child's cries. What did you want then? You did not know enough of the world to imagine truly different lives, but you had small wishes. Perhaps you wanted to be the one who went to market more often, to see new things and faces, Perhaps you wanted to work with cloth or with herbs, to be known for a particular skill. Perhaps you wanted to marry someone who made you laugh more, or who listened more, or who simply saw you as something other than a useful pair of hands. Those wishes did not vanish when you moved into your husband's cottage. They simply sank like stones in a river. The surface of your days ripples with work and duty and talk. Underneath, the stones remain unmoving, altering the flow in ways only you can feel. There are darker desires, too, ones you almost never let rise, even in thought. The desire not to be touched when you are tired and sore and full of everyone else's needs. The desire to say no and have that be enough, without confession afterward, without fear of anger or withdrawal or accusations of being cold. You have sometimes made excuses. My back hurts. I feel unwell. There is too much to do tomorrow. Sometimes they are true. Sometimes they are cover. You know your husband has his own desires, some of them as wordless and pressing as your fear. His frustration, when turned on you, can sour the air in the cottage for days. So you balance, again, always balancing, your own inner needs against his, against what peace you can keep. You hear about women who step outside these lines, in whispers. Stories of wine at dusk, of a woman meeting a man in the shadow of the barn or at the edge of the field, of a child born with hair the wrong color for the official father. These stories are told with a mix of fascination and warning. The priest thunders about them from the pulpit, but it is at the well, in the quiet spaces between chores, that they are picked apart. Some of the women's voices sound harsh, full of judgment. Others carry a note of something else. Not quite admiration, but a kind of frightened envy. You listen and say little. You know what happens when such stories become too loud. There are words like adulteress, whore, witch that cling to women like nettles, that cut their skin and never quite let go. You have seen a woman shunned, her children made to suffer for her sin. You have seen a man in a similar situation laughed at, clapped on the shoulder, his behavior shrugged off. The difference burns, even if you do not have the education to label it as unfair. You also know that your own life leaves you too little room for such risks. Even if you felt a pull towards someone else, even if your heart beat faster at someone's voice or step, the cost of acting on that desire is too high. You think of your children, your place in the village, the fragile stability of your cottage. One reckless moment could smash all of it. So you swallow that part of yourself, too. You let it live only as a flicker in your chest, the brief squeeze of your heart when someone's hand brushes yours by accident. The way you sometimes linger a half-second longer in conversation with someone who listens well. Because you cannot act on your desires, you learn to send them into other channels. You pour them into your work, strange as that sounds. You care how the bread looks when it comes from the oven, how the crust splits, how the smell fills the room. You take satisfaction in a shirt mended so neatly, the rip is nearly invisible. You arrange the few objects you have, a bowl, a cup, a small wooden carving, in a way that pleases you, not because anyone else will notice, but because in that small order you feel something of yourself asserted against the chaos. You also turn some of your desire into prayer. Not the grand prayers the priest speaks aloud, but the quiet ones you breathe while walking to the well or stirring the pot. Give me strength. Give me patience. Let me feel something other than tiredness once in a while. You do not know if anyone hears these prayers. They are as much talking to yourself as to God. But the act of shaping your wordless longings into words, even simple ones, keeps them from choking you. Sometimes, when you go to confession, you hesitate at the part where you must name your sins. You kneel, the wood pressing into your knees, the priest's shadow behind the lattice. You speak the usual words first: impatience, harshness with the children, forgetting a prayer, thoughts of anger toward your husband. Then your tongue pauses over something else. I have had thoughts I should not. You say in a low voice. The priest asks what you mean. You cannot say, I have wondered what it would be like to walk away and never come back. You cannot say, I have imagined someone holding me gently and asking what I want. You cannot say, I have felt a warmth towards someone who is not my husband, and I liked it. So you say instead, thoughts against my state, against my duties. It is vague enough to be safe, but sharp enough to earn you the reminder you half expect. He tells you that discontent is a temptation, that a woman must be grateful for her place, that desires outside of marriage are from the devil. He gives you prayers to say, perhaps a psalm, perhaps extra Ave Marias. You accept the penance, nodding, even as a part of you thinks, grateful for what? For endless work? For a body everyone but me has claims on? For never being asked what I would like? You push that part down, too. You do not let it speak. You will say the prayers and then return to the cottage. In rare moments, you find that desire can also be quiet and good. Not only about escape or forbidden touch, but about something softer, a wish for tenderness. You crave small kindnesses, a hand on your shoulder that does not ask for anything more, a word of praise said without surprise, as if it were natural to appreciate you. An afternoon when someone else insists you sit and rest while they take the bucket. Sometimes your husband gives you small pieces of this, without knowing how deeply they land. He might bring you a crust of bread with a bit of fat from the pot pressed into your hand without ceremony. He might stand behind you for a moment, his palm resting on your back as you both look at the field. He might, once in a long while, ask, "Are you very tired?" In a tone that holds more than irritation. You store these moments, like dried fruit, to be taken out and chewed slowly in your mind when the days are thin. They do not fulfill all your desires, but they keep something inside you from going completely numb. You have always wondered, from that far-off place you barely remember now, how medieval women lived with their desires when their lives left so little room for them. From inside this woman's body, the answer is not dramatic. There are no constant storms, no secret love affairs in every lane. There is instead a continuous, quiet negotiation between what you feel and what you can afford to show. You learn to live with hunger, in your belly, in your heart, in places under your skin no one else sees. You learn which small satisfactions can stand in for larger ones without destroying you. You learn to turn some desires into grief and let them pass like seasons. You learn to tuck others into the smallest folds of your days. A glance, a song hummed under your breath, a stolen moment in the sun with your eyes closed while the baby sleeps. Most of all, you keep going. You keep balancing work, marriage, and all that unspoken wanting without dropping everything. It is not that your desires disappear. They settle into you like bones, part of the structure that holds you up, sometimes aching in bad weather, sometimes quiet, always there. One afternoon, as you hang damp shirts on a line between the cottage and a crooked tree, the sky low and gray but not yet raining, you pause with a clothespin in your mouth and a stretch of fabric in your hands. For a moment, the world narrows to the sight of the wind lifting the edges of the shirts, making them billow like ghosts, like sails, like something ready to leave. You feel a strange, sharp longing you cannot name, for movement, for lightness, for any life in which you are not always the one standing still, pinning everything in place. Then a child calls your name from inside, and you answer, your voice steady. You finish hanging the washing. You go back indoors. The longing does not vanish, but it takes its place again at the back of the line, behind hunger and fatigue and the next task that must be done. You live on. You live your life inside one cottage, one marriage, one chain of days. But you are never entirely alone inside it. The village presses in at every edge. Even when you are not speaking to anyone, you can feel other lives moving close by, like carts passing on a road you can hear but not see. If your work tied you only to your own hearth and field, perhaps you would fold in on yourself completely. But there are places where your boundary blurs, where your life runs into other women's lives and braids with them for a few breaths or a few hours. At the well, at the washing place, at the edge of a field, by a sickbed, at a birth, at a grave. These are the spaces where you are not wife of or mother of first, but just one woman among many, hands in water, feet in mud, voice in the low, shared hum. The well is one of your earliest gatherings. You walked there as a girl beside your mother, carrying a small bucket that felt heavy then. Now you walk there as a woman, bucket handles biting deeper into your hands, but the path is the same. The lane curves, the stones sit where they have always sat. The same tree leans over that one puddle that never quite dries. You could walk it with your eyes closed. Women come to the well because they must. No one can live without water. But they also come because it is a place where talking is allowed to stretch a little longer than inside the cottage, where words can loosen along with stiff wrists and shoulders. You stand in line with your bucket, waiting for your turn at the rope, and listen. The talk is not always important, not on the surface. Someone complains about a child who will not get out of bed. Someone grumbles about a husband who came home late and muddy and wanted food anyway. Someone laughs about a chicken that escaped and led her a chase around the yard. These stories roll out like pebbles. They do not seem heavy. But underneath them lies something you recognize. The need to say aloud that this life is hard, that it frays nerves, that it is sometimes ridiculous, too. There are women older than you at the well, faces lined like dried apples, hands twisted by years of work. There are women younger, their eyes not yet sunk with worry in the same way, their movements still quick and light when they think no one is watching. You fall somewhere in the middle now. The older ones occasionally call you by a pet name they used when you were a girl, forgetting or purposely ignoring that you are grown, that you too have children. The younger ones sometimes glance at you in a way that tells you they see you as one of the married ones, their future and their warning. You learn who likes to talk and who prefers to listen. One woman can fill the whole walk from cottage to well and back with her voice, telling you every detail of her day, every ache in her joints, every foolish thing her husband said. Another offers only short answers, dropping them like stones into the conversation. But her eyes miss nothing. You adjust to each one, offering more words or fewer as needed. Not every word at the well is harmless. Gossip lives there too, as surely as damp and moss. You have heard reputations made and broken by the time it takes to draw one bucket. Stories about who drank too much at the last festival, whose son was seen near the woods with someone he shouldn't be, whose daughter's belly is getting rounder before the wedding, whose husband raised his hand too often. Sometimes the stories are true, sometimes they are not. Often they are a mix of both. You listen, and you are careful. You cannot afford to be entirely outside the flow of news. Knowing what happens in other houses helps you navigate your own. But you also know how quickly talk can turn. The same mouths that praise your good bread one day can wonder on another if you have become too proud, too quiet, too something. So you keep your sharper thoughts tucked behind your teeth. You offer safe remarks, shaped so they will not be grabbed and twisted. Still, there are women you trust a little more. Not completely. No one in your world can be trusted completely, because hunger and fear make people do strange things. But enough that you let some of your inner thoughts slip out in their presence. There is one, perhaps, who has known you since you were small, who stood beside you at other women's births, who held your hand under the water when a fever took your child. With her, when the line at the well thins and the others drift away, you might let your shoulders drop, let a sigh escape that is deeper than usual. She hears the difference. "How is it then?" she asks in a low voice, looping the rope around the post with practiced motions. You look at the bucket, at the rippling surface. Words crowd your throat. About your husband's silence these last weeks, about the way your back feels like splintered wood every night, about the strange, restless ache you carry that is not hunger and not exactly sadness. You measure each one for weight and risk.
Tiring,
You say finally.
the little one does not sleep. The big ones are always fighting. The bread goes faster than I can bake it.
She nods. This is safe ground. Every woman knows these complaints.
There is never enough of anything.
She answers.
Not time, not food, not quiet.
Her eyes meet yours for a little longer than usual. In that extra moment, you both acknowledge the rest of it. The things neither of you will say aloud here. The fears about aging, about desire, about losing yourself entirely in other people's needs. Then the moment closes again. Someone else approaches the well. The careful surface returns. The washing place is another gathering. On days when the weather allows and the pile of dirty cloth grows too large to ignore, you and other women haul baskets of foul-smelling linen and wool to the stream or the boards near water. You kneel or bend, your hands in cold water, scrubbing, pounding, wringing, your arms turning to lead. The work is brutal on your body, but lighter on your mind because it is shared. Here the talk is louder. There is something about beating cloth against stone that loosens tongues. Each slap of fabric punctuates a complaint or a joke. You tell stories about the children's mischief, about a pig that got into someone's garden, about a priest who slipped on ice and tried to turn it into a sermon. Laughter bubbles up, despite the pain in your wrists. You also share more practical things here. Which herbs helped with the cough, which midwife was kind and which one was rough. How to stretch a bit of barley so the stew feels less thin. Someone mentions a new ache, and 3 others rush in with remedies, some handed down, some half-invented. The knowledge in these conversations is rarely written anywhere, but it lives in your hands, in your tongues, in the way you pass it from one generation to the next. Sometimes, amidst the joking and the talk of sore backs, someone says something that lands heavy. A bruise glimpsed on a woman's arm when her sleeve slips back. A quiet admission that her husband has been drinking more. A story about a neighbor's child who has gone to service and sends no word. The laughter eases, grows thinner. You all look at each other for a second, acknowledging the darker thread running under everything. We must endure, someone will say at last, making the sign of the cross, and the talk shifts again, circling away but never truly leaving. You see rivalries here, too. Not all women are kind, and not all disputes come from men. 2 women whose parcels of land border each other may watch each other's harvest with narrowed eyes. One might boast about a larger loaf or a son who works harder. Old grievances over a borrowed pot not returned, over a word taken the wrong way years ago, can rise again in sharp remarks about muddy footprints or careless children. You learn to navigate these tensions. You know who cannot be trusted with a secret, who always repeats what she hears with a twist added. You know who will offer help without keeping score, and who will count every favor and call it in at a bad time. The village is small, the net of relationships fine and easily torn. You step carefully, knowing that the same woman who shares her bread with you one winter may, in another season, help spread a rumor that burns your reputation. There are other women's spaces less public than the well or washing place. The cramped corners of cottages during births and deaths. When a woman in the village goes into labor, word moves quickly. Someone sends for the midwife, someone else knocks on neighbors' doors. The men mostly stay outside or hover uselessly at the edges. Inside, the air fills with the sounds of women, the mother's cries, the midwife's instructions, the older women murmuring prayers or encouragement, the rustle of cloth, the clink of water jugs and basins. You have been part of these scenes from both sides now, as the one on the bed and as the one standing at the foot of it. When you go to help another woman in labor, carrying clean rags and whatever else you have, you feel your own body echoing with memory. The pain of your past births flickers through your hips and spine, as if your muscles remember on their own. You see the fear in the laboring woman's eyes and want to tell her that she is strong enough, and also that sometimes strength does not decide the outcome. But you say simpler things. Breathe. Hold on. You can do this. Mary, watch over you. In those cramped hours, you are not separated by rank, or by husband's mood, or by old quarrels. You are all simply women keeping someone company at the narrow border between life and death. You hold her. You wipe her forehead. You bear her curses when the pain peaks. You offer your hand for her to crush. Later, if the baby cries and the mother smiles through tears, you feel a shared relief so deep it makes your knees weak. If the baby is still, or the mother grows quiet in a way that is wrong, you share a quieter grief, a silence so heavy it presses your chests together. At funerals, you gather again at the edge of another border. The church is cold, the ritual familiar, but the real mourning happens in the spaces afterward, around the grave, at the wake, in the houses where someone's voice will not be heard again. You bring bread, broth, a few words of sympathy. You sit with the widow or the mother or the child who has lost their own child, letting them talk or not talk. Your presence itself becomes a kind of work, holding the shape of normal life around someone whose world has been torn. These are the places where shared secrets form, in the pauses between prayers, in the gaps between chores, in the long nights of watching over the sick or the dead. You might say, in a low voice, "There was a time I thought I would die in childbirth, too." Or, "I hated my husband for months after we buried the last one." Or, "Sometimes I wish I could walk out of this cottage and keep walking." The woman you speak to might look at you sharply, as if afraid that someone else will hear. Then she might nod, her eyes wet, and answer, "I have thought the same. I thought I was wicked for it." For a moment you both sit in the truth of that shared wickedness, which is really only the truth of being human. Then the moment passes. Someone needs more water. The baby cries. A man calls from the lane. You return to your roles. There are rare, almost shocking moments when laughter and desire and solidarity tangle together openly. Perhaps at harvest, when the work is done for the day and someone has brought out a jug of ale. You sit in a loose circle with other women, your legs stretched out, your backs against the same fence you have cursed all summer for catching your skirts. Someone tells a story about a foolish young man who thought he knew everything about women's bodies and clearly does not. The way she mimics his swagger makes you snort, despite your better self. Even the more pious among you crack a smile. You add your own detail to the story, surprising yourself with your boldness. The women laugh. The sound rises into the evening air, rich and full. For a few breaths, you are all simply together in that sound. No husbands, no children, no lords, no priests. Just tired bodies recognizing something funny and sharp and real. That too will pass. But it leaves behind a warmth that you carry back to your cottage like a hidden coal. Your silent desires sometimes find their only voice in these women's spaces, though even there you rarely speak them plainly. You might say, "I wish I could sleep a whole morning without being called," and hear three voices answer, "So do I," in a tired chorus. You might say, "Sometimes I dream of walking until I don't know anyone's name," and see understanding in eyes that look quickly away in case someone else is listening. You realize, slowly, that you are not the only one balancing so much. The woman who seems always cheerful at the well has her own dark corners. The sharp-tongued neighbor who criticizes everyone else's children has lost two of her own, and still wakes at night searching for them. The older woman who scolds you for moving too slowly once broke her back carrying wood, and has never fully recovered. Each of them carries a bundle of work, marriage, and quiet yearning on her shoulders, wrapped in different cloth, but heavy all the same. Sometimes you resent them. It would be easier, you think, on your worst days, if everyone around you were kind and wise and gentle. But they are just as tired and frightened as you are, and tired, frightened people are not always kind. They say cutting things. They spread stories they shouldn't. They judge quickly. Other times you feel a fierce tenderness toward them, even the difficult ones. When you see an older woman stumble on the lane and catch yourself with a hand that shakes, your heart clenches. You set down your own basket to help, because you see your future in her bent shoulders. When a young bride comes to the well for the first time, with a bruise she tries to hide, you feel anger rise like fire in your gut, not only at the man who put it there, but at the world that taught him he could. You offer her a gentle hand, a place beside you, a small piece of advice disguised as a joke. Being part of this web of women does not solve your problems. It does not lighten the tasks of your own cottage or soften your husband's temper or suddenly give you more food, more rest, more choices. But it makes your life less narrow. Your story is not only the one being written inside your four walls, it is also reflected and refracted through all these other lives, each one a mirror showing you a different angle of your own struggle. You see versions of yourself in them. Who you might become if your husband dies first and you are left with children and fields to manage. Who you might be if you never had children at all. Who you might be if you lived long enough to have white hair and be the one everyone calls when a baby is coming or a death is near. From that other life far away, you once wondered how medieval women bore the strain of their own lives without breaking. From here, you see that none of you do it alone. You lean on each other in small, often invisible ways, sharing bread, sharing news, sharing burdens, sharing small, risky truths in corners. The alliances are not written down or blessed by any priest, but they are as real as any marriage bond, sometimes sturdier at night when you are back in your own cottage, the village quiet outside and your family asleep around you. You think sometimes of the other women lying in their straw. You picture them in their own dim rooms, bodies sprawled in exhaustion, faces slack for once. You imagine the same kind of weariness in their bones, the same lists turning in their minds, the same half-formed desires curling up beside them like invisible animals. You understand then that you are part of something bigger than your own story. Not the grand history of kings and battles, but a low, steady current of women's lives flowing side by side, century after century. Each of you balancing work and marriage and silent wants as best you can. Each of you caught between duty and longing. Each of you finding what small comfort you can in shared glances over a well, in hands meeting under a heavy basket, in stories whispered at the edge of a field. You close your eyes with that knowledge sitting heavy and strangely comforting in your chest. Tomorrow you will go to the well again, to the washing place, to someone's cottage where a baby is due or someone is ill. Tomorrow you will step back into that quiet chorus, one voice among many. For now, you rest, your breath joining theirs in the dark. You have lived your whole life under the sound of bells and the shadow of stories. Long before you understood what they meant, the church tower stood above your village like a finger pointing upward. And words about God, demons, saints, and hell settled around you like dust in the air, always there, breathed in without thinking. As you grew, the weight you carried was not only wood and water and children. It was also the invisible weight of what you should believe, what you should fear, and what you must never say out loud. Faith and fear do not live in separate rooms for you. They share the same space inside your chest. On some days, they feel like two hands holding you up. On other days, they feel like two hands pressing you down. Sundays and feast days are when you feel this most sharply. You walk to the church with your family, feet on the same path you have always used, the lane narrowing into a track lined with hedges and stones. Children tug at your skirt. Your husband walks a step or two ahead, his shirt brushed as smooth as your hands could make it. You wear your less patched dress, your better headscarf, not because God cares about such things, you were told, but because other eyes do. The church stands at the center of the village, stone thick and gray. a little damp smell already seeping from it even from a distance. Inside, the air is cooler than outside, even in summer. It smells of old stone, old wood, old prayers. Candles flicker in small pools of light, their wax pooled like melted bones. The saints look down from their painted places on the walls, faces stiff and strange, some kind, some severe, each holding a symbol you half remember from sermons: keys, a sword, a wheel, a book, a lamb. Merriest, you dip your fingers in the holy water at the door, tracing the sign of the cross on your chest, forehead, shoulders. The gesture so automatic your mind often runs ahead of it. You move into the familiar space, the place where women stand or kneel, where children squirm, where men shift and cough and try to look more solid than they feel. You kneel on the hard floor, skirts pooling around your knees, and feel the stone press into your flesh. The priest begins. His voice fills the echoing space, words in Latin that you do not fully understand, then simpler words in your own tongue that you do. He speaks of sin, of obedience, of God's judgment, of hell's fire. He speaks of Eve and her fault, of how a woman brought sin into the world, and how a good woman must now repay that debt with submission and labor and modesty. You have heard this so many times that it no longer shocks you, but some part of you still flinches each time, as if he has thrown a small stone that finds the same bruise again. You look down at your hands, folded on your lap. They are rough, scarred from work, marked by a life of service. When he talks about women's vanity and wickedness, you almost want to hold your palms up and ask, these hands? These hands that have fed and scrubbed and soothed? These are the dangerous things you fear? But you do not speak. Your tongue stays still. You were taught long ago what is safe to say and what is not. At the same time, you lean on these sermons as you lean on the well's stone rim. Not every word feels like a blow. Some feel like a blanket. When he speaks of God seeing the hidden troubles of the lowly, of Christ suffering pain to understand yours, of Mary watching at the foot of the cross as a mother, something in you loosens. You think of your own losses, your own aches, the way no one in the cottage sees how tired you truly are. It is a strange comfort to imagine that someone larger, beyond fields and taxes and lords, might be watching and keeping count of all you endure. You pray for your children's safety, for your husband's temper to soften, for the harvest to be enough, for sickness to pass your door. You also, quietly, in words so soft you barely form them, pray for yourself, for patience when you have none left, for rest, for some small tenderness. You do not know if such prayers are selfish. The priest rarely talks of women's needs beyond being good wives and mothers. But the words rise anyway like steam from a pot. You let them. Fear lives in this space too. The carved face of a demon leers from a little corner near the door, part of some old story, its tongue hanging out, its eyes bulging. The priest is fond of describing hell. The endless fire, the gnawing worms, the screaming souls. He describes the punishments for adulterers, for liars, for the disobedient, for women who tempt men, for those who neglect their duties, for those who harbor unclean thoughts. You kneel there and feel each category brush against you like cold fingers. Have you ever thought of another man? Have you ever wished to run away from your duties? Have you ever been angry at your husband, at God? Does sighing too deeply count as ingratitude? You remind yourself that you are trying. You work, you care, you pray, but fear is not logical. It creeps in along with the candle smoke. It sits in your chest, whispering, what if that one time you snapped at your child, that one moment you wished to be elsewhere, that is enough to tip the scales? You picture the great balance at judgment, your good deeds on one side, your thoughts and failings on the other, and you wonder how anyone can ever be sure. Outside of church, faith threads itself through your day in small acts that have become automatic. You make the sign of the cross over bread before you cut it, not because you expect a miracle loaf to appear, but because you are afraid of what it means not to ask for blessing. When you plant seeds, you murmur a half-remembered phrase, "Lord, let what goes into the earth rise again." You hang a sprig of blessed herbs or a palm from Palm Sunday in the rafters of the cottage to keep away lightning or demons or bad luck. No one explains clearly which, and you do not ask. You whisper prayers over sleeping children, your hand resting lightly on their heads in the dark, tracing a small cross on their foreheads. "Keep them," you say, to God, to Mary, to any saint listening. "Keep them from sickness, keep them from wrong, keep them from harm." You know the world ignores such requests often, but not saying them feels too dangerous, like leaving your door unbarred in a night full of wolves. Alongside these sanctioned acts of faith live other, quieter practices that the priest might not approve or pretends not to know about. You tie a little charm at the door, a bit of iron, a thread with knots, a carved symbol someone's grandmother swore would turn away the evil eye. You mutter a rhyme under your breath while stirring a particular herb into a pot, a rhyme you were taught as a girl with a warning never to repeat it in front of a priest. When a child is sick, you say the proper prayers, sprinkle holy water, and also slip a small amulet under their pillow, just in case. You do not see these things as disloyal to God. In your mind, the world is crowded with forces you cannot see, some benevolent, some malicious, some simply indifferent. You are a small woman with few tools. Why not use every one available, as long as it does no harm? If a charm at the door makes you sleep a little easier, if a whispered rhyme makes your hands tremble less over a feverish child, you hold to them the way you hold to the wooden spoon and the bucket yoke. They are means of coping in a world that rarely feels safe. Night is when fear swells to its largest size. During the day, work fills every corner of your mind. At night, when the fire burns low and the children's breathing is the loudest sound in the cottage, your thoughts are no longer kept busy by constant movement. They expand into the dark, meeting shapes that frighten you. You hear stories, at the well and in church, about demons that prowl after sunset, about witches who fly or meet unseen powers in the woods, about ghosts who wander because they were not buried properly or have unfinished business. At some level, you are not sure how much of this is exact truth and how much is warning shaped into a story. It does not matter. Your fear does not ask for proof. A creak in the rafters might be only the woods settling. A soft scrape at the door might be a branch or an animal. But you lie there, eyes open in the dark, and imagine eyes watching through the gap, claws scratching, something waiting. You pull the blanket higher, make the sign of the cross on your chest, whisper, "Jesus, Mary," into the straw. You think of your sins, both real and imagined, and for a moment you are sure that all the unseen things in the night know them too. Sometimes fear comes not as stories about demons, but as dreams. You wake, sweating from visions of fire, of your children falling from cliffs that do not exist near your village, of hands dragging you down into water. You see your dead child standing at the foot of your bed, saying nothing, and wake with your throat choked on a cry. You roll over, your hand searching blindly for the warm bodies of the living ones, counting them by touch. Only when you have accounted for each breath do you let your own breathing slow. On certain days of the year, the church leans into this fear and tries to shape it. At All Souls, the priest reminds you of the dead, of souls in purgatory, of how your prayers might shorten their suffering. You stand in the graveyard, the damp seeping into your shoes, and look at the clustered mounds. Some of them hold people you loved. Some of them hold people you barely knew. All of them are under the same earth you will one day join. Candles flicker on a few graves, little points of light against the gray. You feel small and temporary. The priest talks of judgment and mercy. You cling to the mercy and hope it is larger. At other times, faith feels less like fear and more like rhythm. The year is punctuated by feasts and fasts, Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter, Saints' Days, local festivals tied to the fields and the harvest. These days do not remove your work, they shift it. On fast days, you must do more with less food. On feast days, you must work longer to prepare the better meal, to scrub the cottage a little cleaner, to polish what little you have. Yet they also break the monotony. You know where you are in the year, not only by the state of the fields and the strength of the wind, but by which hymn is being sung, which procession moves through the lane, which statue is decorated with flowers. In these cycles, you find a kind of comfort. Your own life may feel uncertain, your future cloudy, but the church's calendar turns like the wheel of a cart, steady, predictable. You have seen the same candles lit for the same feasts since you were a child. You know that no matter what happens inside your cottage, birth, death, argument, reconciliation, the bells will ring for Easter at the right time. The priest will bless the fields again. The village will walk in a line behind the cross and banners, singing words you could recite even half asleep. This rhythm seeps into your inner life. When you cannot sleep, you sometimes recite parts of familiar prayers to yourself, not only for God's ear, but for your own. Ave Maria, full of grace. Pater noster, qui es in celis. The words roll through you like a lullaby, even when you are too tired to put much feeling into them. They draw lines around your anxiety, if only for a little while. Your silent desires, those complicated longings for rest, for being seen, for something softer, thread themselves through your faith as well. There are days when you turn those desires directly into prayers, asking plainly, "Let someone be kind to me today. Let there be less shouting in this house. Let me feel something like joy that is not immediately swallowed by guilt." You ask Mary to intercede because she is a woman and a mother, and you imagine she might understand the knots in your mind better than a distant, judging Lord. You look at her statue with its painted blue cloak and folded hands and think, you must have wanted things too? You must have been afraid too. Other times, your desires bump hard against the teachings you hear. When the priest warns against discontent, you feel your own restless thoughts stiffen in defiance. When he speaks harshly about women who stray in body or in mind, you feel the shots landing close, like arrows in the ground near your feet. Part of you nods along, afraid of chaos, afraid of what unchecked desire could do to fragile structures. Another part of you whispers in the privacy of your skull, "We are already bound so tightly. Must even our thoughts be chained?" You carry that question back to your cottage and do not speak it aloud. Instead, you keep building your inner world in layers no one else fully sees. On the outside, you are the same woman everyone knows. Your hands busy, your voice practical, your posture bent over tasks. On the inside, you are also a listener, a doubter, a small theologian. You argue with God in your own head while you scrub pots. You lay out your grievances against hunger, against unfair treatment, against a world where women bear most of the labor and half of the blame, in a silent courtroom where only you and the God you half fear and half hope in are present. You do not always reach a resolution. Sometimes you end those inner conversations only because a child screams or the pot boils over. But the arguments themselves keep a part of you awake that might otherwise go numb. Confession is one of the few times you are invited to speak about the inside of yourself. And even then, the invitation is narrow. You kneel in the appointed place, the smell of incense and old wood thick around you. The priest's shadow looms through the lattice. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." The words come by rote. You list what you know is expected: impatience, anger, missing Mass, neglecting a prayer, harsh words said to husband or children. Then you come to the harder things. "I have had discontent in my heart," you might say, or "I have had thoughts against my duties." The priest, who has heard many confessions from many women, recognizes this shape. He reminds you that you must accept the station God has given you, that rebellion of the heart is as dangerous as rebellion of the hand, that a good wife and mother is a quiet one. You swallow your real responses. You do not say, God did not choose my husband, men did. You do not say, if contentment must be forced, is it still virtue? You nod, take the penance, say the extra prayers he assigns. You walk out into the sunlight with your soul technically cleaner and your questions still unanswered, tucked back into their usual corners. And yet, even with all its burdens, fear of hell, of demons, of getting belief wrong, faith remains one of the few places where your inner life is acknowledged at all. No one in your family regularly asks, what do you think? How do you feel inside? The church, for all its insistence on obedience, does at least speak of souls, of inner struggles, of tears shed in the dark being seen. On days when work presses extra hard and marriage feels like another yoke around your neck, and your silent desires seem on the edge of breaking you, you sometimes slip into the church alone, if you can. The door is often open. The space is cool, dim, almost empty. You kneel or sit on a bench. You say nothing at first. The silence around you is a different kind than the silence of the cottage. There, silence usually means someone is sleeping or angry. Here it feels like a deep pool you might lower yourself into. You let your shoulders relax, just a little. You let yourself feel exactly as tired as you are. Maybe a tear tracks down your cheek, maybe not. You look at Mary, at the crucifix, at the altar cloth someone's hands embroidered stitch by stitch. You remember that other women before you knelt here with their own tangled bundles of work, marriage, and desire. Other women laid these burdens down for a moment, if only in their minds, and then picked them up again. You add yours to that long, invisible pile. You have always wondered, from that distant vantage point outside time, how medieval women held all of this inside without going mad. Labor and hunger and harsh seasons, yes, but also faith, fear, stories of devils and saints and witches, desires they could never fully voice. From within this life, the answer is not a neat prayer or a clean doctrine. It is this. You weave it together. You tie fear to faith, faith to routine, routine to small, private hopes. You hide your questions under the same cloth that covers your hair. You say the words you are supposed to say aloud, and keep the rest as a quiet conversation between you and the dark. And at the end of each day, after the bells have rung and the prayers have been mumbled and the fire has been banked, you lie on your straw bed between your husband's breathing and your children's soft sounds, and feel your heart still beating under all of it. No priest can hear that beat. No neighbor can see the exact shape of your inner world. But it is there, stubborn as a weed in poor soil. A small, steady rhythm that refuses to stop. In that rhythm, faith, fear, and folklore all live together. Saints and charms, hellfire and lullabies, sermons and whispered spells. They do not make your life easy. They do not remove your burdens, but they give names to the things that frighten you. They give a pattern to time. They give you someone, even if only imagined, to speak to when no one else is listening. In the end, that is part of how you balance everything. Even when you do not know you are doing it, you carry not only wood and water and bread, not only your family's needs and your own silent wants, but also an inner world dense with stories and prayers that keeps you from being only a pair of hands. You fall asleep as you always do, somewhere between a half-finished prayer and a stray worry. The smell of smoke in your hair, the echo of bells fading. Tomorrow, God willing, you will wake again to the same weight. You will shoulder it again. And somewhere between the church and the cottage, between fear and hope, between what you may say and what must stay silent, you will keep walking. You do not notice the exact day when you become an older woman. There is no bell that rings for it, no feast on the church calendar. It comes the way all changes in your life have come, slowly, quietly, woven into the sameness of work. One morning you wake and the ache in your back feels a little deeper, as if it has sunk down into the bones themselves instead of just the muscles. One afternoon you catch your reflection in a pot or a still patch of water and see more lines around your mouth, more gray among the strands of hair escaping your scarf. Children in the lane call you Aunt instead of by your name alone, or even grandmother if time has moved far enough. You do not feel as different inside as these signs say you are. But the village has already shifted you into another place in its invisible order. Your work has not left you. There is no age in your world when a woman simply stops. But some tasks change weight. Some burdens transfer to younger shoulders. You no longer carry the heaviest buckets every day. Or, if you try, someone will say, "Let the girl take that. You'll break yourself." Half in kindness, half in fear that losing your labor would break them. Your knees do not like the same endless kneeling. Your fingers resist the tight, fine work they once did without complaint. You find yourself more often directing than doing, telling a younger woman how long the grain must soak, showing a girl how to mend so a seam doesn't split again after one wearing. You hover near the hearth while someone else does the hardest pounding or scrubbing, your body both grateful and restless. Your children, if they have lived, are mostly grown now. Some may be in service in bigger houses, your daughters or sons sent to work for people with more land, more coin. Some may be married, scattered across nearby cottages and villages, carrying their own bundles of duty. You look at them and see your old life from the outside for the first time. When you visit a daughter's cottage, you watch her move through the same rhythms you once followed, tending the fire, snapping at children, softening when they trip and cry, reading her husband's face as he comes through the door. You recognize the way her shoulders lift and drop when she thinks no one is watching. That small sigh that is not quite complaint, not quite surrender. You remember making that same sound. It is like listening to your own past breathing in a younger body. With sons, you see something else. How they have become men who expect certain things without naming them, because that is how the world shaped them. One picks up a tool and goes to the field, while his wife remains to scrub and cook and soothe. One frowns at bread cut too thin or stew too watery, not because he is cruel, but because he has grown up believing that his full stomach marks a well-run house. At those moments, you feel an odd double pull. You love him still as the boy who once clung to your skirts, who cried at night when storms frightened him. You also feel an urge to shake him by the shoulders and say, "You have no idea what she carries." Sometimes, when you can, you smooth his harsh words with your own. "She does what she can," you say, in a voice that allows no argument. "The harvest was poor, you know that." He grumbles, perhaps, but quiets. You cannot change the whole shape of the world, but you can press your hand here and there against its sharper edges. The house you live in now feels both larger and emptier. There are fewer small feet on the floor, fewer voices calling "Mother" every hour. The cottage is quieter, and in that quiet you can hear the ticking of your own body more clearly, the creak of joints when you rise, the shortness of breath when you climb the small hill, the way your hands tremble slightly when you hold a cup too full. You notice how often you must pause when carrying wood, how sometimes at the well you let someone younger take your place at the rope. No one calls you lazy. They see you as old now, even if inside you still feel like the woman in the middle of everything, the one who once never had a moment to herself. With fewer constant demands from small children, you find spaces opening inside your days that you have not known for years. At first, these spaces startle you. You sit by the door after finishing a task and realize no one is immediately asking for more. Your hands lie in your lap, idle, and instead of being pulled to the next thing, they simply rest. The stillness feels almost unlawful, as if someone will burst in and accuse you of wasting time when no one does. When the cottage remains quiet and the world continues turning, you begin to accept that these pauses are not theft, but something you have earned. In these small pockets of time, your mind drifts in ways it could not before. You think of your life as if it were laid out in rows like the fields. The years of girlhood, short and weedy. The strong, straight lines of your early married days. The patches broken by stones. The deaths, the hunger years. The fights so hard they left scars. You think of the years when babies were always on your hip or your breast. Days when your own body felt more like a tool than a self. You think of the long stretch in the middle, when you were too busy to think about anything beyond surviving each week. Now, standing at the edge of all those fields, you run your eyes over them slowly and wonder what kind of harvest you had. There is no one to answer that question for you. The priest might say your harvest is measured in souls, your own, your family's, and that if you have kept the faith and obeyed, that is enough. Your husband, if he is still alive, might measure it in land not lost, in taxes paid, in children who can work, in grandchildren underfoot. The other women might measure it in how your name is spoken when you aren't there. She keeps a good house. She is kind. She is sharp. She is unlucky. You, alone at your door, measure it in quieter ways. In the children still breathing, in the small freedoms you have clawed out at the edges of your day, in the pieces of yourself you managed not to let die. You realize that balancing work, marriage, and silent desires has never been a problem you solved once and for all. It has been a daily act, repeated in slightly different form every morning. When you were younger, you thought perhaps there would come a point when the balance would feel easy, when you would no longer have to think about which needs to put first or how to swallow your own longing to keep peace. That point never arrived. What arrived instead was a kind of familiarity with the uncertainty. You learn to stand on shifting ground without falling each time it moved. As you grow older, some parts of this balancing act change. There are expectations you no longer have to meet in the same way. No one expects you to bear more children. No one expects your body to rise to your husband's desire with the same readiness. Your place in the marriage shifts, sometimes without either of you naming it. If your husband is still with you, his own body is changing too. His strength in the fields lessens. His step grows slower. His anger in some ways softens. In others, it sharpens, as fear of sickness and death creeps in and has nowhere to go but out through his voice. You find yourself caring for him more, the way you once cared for your children, reminding him to eat, easing him into bed when his back seizes, listening when he mutters about debts and lords and the unfairness of everything. There is a strange intimacy in this stage of marriage. You have known each other for so long that words are often unnecessary. You can read his mood in the way he opens the door, in the sound of his boots on the floor. He can read your pain in the way you get up or fail to. You have built this life together, brick by brick, task by task. Whether or not there was ever the kind of love the songs talk about, there is something like shared ownership of a story, and that itself is a bond. Your silent desires have not vanished with age. Some have quieted because their objects are no longer possible. You no longer dream of leaving everything behind to start somewhere new. You know your feet would not carry you very far. You no longer imagine a different husband. There is no point now. Habits are too deep, and the thought itself feels almost childish. The desire for grand passion cools into a gentler longing that the man who has shared your bed for so many years might, once in a while, look at you and see not just the familiar shape at the hearth, but a person whose inner world he never fully knew. Other desires remain as sharp as ever. The desire for rest does not lessen. If anything, it grows more bitter because you know now that a day of true rest will probably never come, not in this life. The desire to be understood does not disappear. It simply becomes more realistic, shrinking from the dream of someone understanding all of you to the hope that someone might understand even a little. The desire for beauty remains. A shaft of light on the table, a scrap of colored cloth, the sound of a melody hummed by someone in the lane. You have learned to take these things as they come, without expecting more from them than they can give. Your relationship to fear changes too. When you were younger, you feared the next pregnancy, the next bad harvest, the next fever. You feared your husband's anger, the priest's disapproval, the village's judgment. Those fears have not disappeared. Hunger and disease are still never far, but they sit alongside a newer, larger fear, the knowledge that your own life is moving toward its end. It is not a story told to you about someone else anymore. You feel it in the mornings when it takes longer to straighten your back. In the evenings when climbing into bed feels like scaling a small hill. You think about death more often now, not only when someone else dies. In church, when the priest speaks of heaven and hell, of judgment and mercy, you listen with a different ear than you did as a girl who believed she had endless time to fix herself. You think of your sins, the named ones and the unnamed, the anger you held, the sharp words you did not confess, the desires you never dared to express in words, but carried anyway. You also think of the good you have done, the work, the care, the unseen sacrifices no one counted. You hope someone was counting. You talk to God in a different way now. You still say the formal prayers, your mouth forming the Latin you do not fully understand because it feels dangerous not to. But when you are alone, your prayers become simpler, more direct. You have seen it all, you say inside your head while sweeping or sitting by the fire. You know how hard it has been. You know where I have failed. You know where I tried. Be kinder than this world has been. Sometimes in the church's cool dimness, you look at the crucifix and feel not only guilt but a strange solidarity, as if that carved figure also knows what it is to carry weight until the body breaks. Your place among the women of the village shifts. Younger women come to you now with questions they ask as if asking about recipes or chores, but which you recognize as being about deeper things. How do you manage when a child will not stop crying? How did you get through the hunger year? What do you do when your husband comes home in a temper? Does it get easier? They ask these things while their hands are busy with work, eyes often lowered, careful, as if they are afraid to admit how close they are to breaking. You answer as honestly as you can without making their burdens heavier. You offer small, practical advice. Always keep a little aside if you can. Never let the fire die completely. Find another woman you can speak to plainly when you think you will lose your mind. Sometimes you admit more, that you too have thought of running away and did not. That there were days you hated everyone in your own cottage. That sometimes you still feel a wild, nameless ache with no remedy. You say it gently, without drama, and they look at you with a kind of relief. You see in their faces the understanding that their struggles are not a unique failure, but part of a long pattern. You become, in a quiet way, a keeper of stories. Children beg you for tales in the evenings, saints and monsters, miracles and warnings, ghosts and brave girls. You tell them what you remember from your own childhood, what you have reshaped in your mind, what you have half invented from bits and pieces. You watch their eyes widen at the right moments, hear their small gasps when the danger rises, feel their bodies lean closer when the story brushes against their own secret fears. You tell them, sometimes openly, sometimes buried in the tale, that people can be cruel and people can be kind, that the world is hard and full of danger, but also lit with small lights. You never became a writer of books. There are no books for you to write in. But these spoken stories, told over and over, become a kind of legacy. They carry not only saints and demons and miracles, but also tiny bits of your own thoughts about what it means to endure, what it means to love, what it means to go on when you are so tired you feel hollow. You cannot give your children wealth or wide choices. You can give them ways to make sense of their hardships, to see themselves not only as victims of fate, but as part of a long chain of people who survived as best they could. On certain evenings, when the light is soft and the fields are quiet, and your work is as done as it will ever be, You stand just outside your cottage door and look at the sky. You see the slow changing of colors, the thin line of smoke from your roof, the shapes of neighbors moving through their own small tasks. Someone calls to someone else, a dog barks, a child laughs. You feel in your tired chest a fragile, surprising feeling. Not joy exactly, but something like a gentle acceptance. This life has not been what you might have dreamt if you had been allowed to dream freely. It has been narrower, harder, harsher. And yet, you are still here. You have bent, but not fully broken. You have loved and been loved in clumsy, imperfect ways. You have worked until your hands became maps of that labor. You have carried desires you never spoke, and somehow they did not burn you completely from the inside. From that faraway place, we once only wondered how medieval women balanced work, marriage, and silent desires. The answer might still look like a mystery. From where you stand now, older, spine curved, hands rough, the answer is not a single word, but a long, long line of days. Getting up when you did not want to, doing the next necessary thing, finding or making small pockets of peace wherever you could, trusting or arguing with God as needed, leaning on other women's shoulders and offering your own in turn, managing your hungers of body and heart so they did not devour you. One day, sooner than feels fair and later than you once thought you could endure, your body will simply stop. You hope it will be in your own bed, with a familiar roof above you and familiar breaths around you. Perhaps you will be ill for a while, lying on the same pallet where you once labored to bring life into the world, now laboring to release your own. Perhaps it will be quick, a fall, a winter fever. You do not know. No one does. You imagine sometimes, in a quiet moment you never tell anyone about, what it might feel like in that last stretch. Will your mind run back over your life, as it does now in calmer moments, touching each field, each season? Will you cling to regrets? Will you feel only relief that the weight is being lifted? You hope that when it comes there will be a brief clarity, the sense that however clumsy your steps, you walked as best you could on the road given to you. And maybe, just maybe, in whatever lies beyond the end of that road, there will be a place where a woman can sit down while someone else keeps the fire. A place where she can rest her rough hands and finally empty her heart of all the words she never dared to say. For now, you are still here. You bank the fire for the night, listening to your husband's slower breathing, to the rustle of someone turning over on their pallet, to the distant bark of a village dog. You lie down. Pain flares in one hip, settles, becomes part of the familiar background. You fold your hands over your chest for a moment and feel your own pulse, steady but not as strong as it once was. You whisper a short, plain prayer. Thank you for letting me come this far. Help me carry what is left. Then you let sleep come, as you have so many times before, trusting that tomorrow, if it comes, you will do again what you have always done. Rise, work, balance, endure, and keep that small, stubborn inner self alive beneath it all.